Hey, everybody.
Hey there, guys. This is Rita.
This is Amanda, and you're listening to
I Don't Know Her,
the podcast where we talk about women you've probably never heard of.
But you will.
Yes. Obviously. Today, we're going to tell you about women.
Awesome.
Before we do that, I wanted to say that obviously when this actually goes up, it'll probably be a few weeks from now, but yesterday, Lizzo's album dropped.
Oh my gosh. It's #1 right now.
I know. It beat out Beyonce, which is my other queen. So I couldn't believe that. I mean, she can't believe that.
I know. I couldn't either. I was like, whoa, that's a big deal. Yeah.
I thought that's some pretty cool shit. Thanks for putting up with our Lizzo love, because I promise we don't work for her. We don't get any kickbacks.
I just found a new hashtag too. It's called Lizzo is the Shizzo. So it's going to be my new hashtag for 2019.
I have a Lizzo shirt now because we wanted to go to her show. Mm-hmm. And so if you pre-bought her album like before it came out and paid for this t-shirt or whatever, you would get like a pre-sale code to get tickets to her show. And then we ended up not being able to go to her concert in either Seattle or Portland because it's the same weekend that that Get Lit is happening here in Spokane.
Oh, and Amanda's doing a reading.
And I am too.
Yeah.
I'm reading on Saturday, and the concert I can't remember if it was on Friday, it was in Seattle, and on Sunday it's in Portland. I think that's the way it is. So I was like, well, maybe we can go to the Sunday show and I'll just take Monday off. And then I realized that we have tickets to see Jim Gaffigan, the comedian.
Yeah.
And we've had them for like 4 months. So it totally slipped my mind because I didn't even think about it. And I was like, no.
You got an activities Bermuda Triangle going on.
So if you haven't already done so, you should check out Beyonce's Homecoming on Netflix.
I have not listened or watched yet.
I didn't get to finish it yet. We started it the other night, and then I can't remember why we got interrupted. Yeah, anyway, I haven't been able to watch Homecoming yet on Netflix. I watched a few minutes of it, but we got interrupted for a phone call. But I'm really excited. That's like my Saturday night plans.
Nice.
I'm going to watch it tonight. I'm very excited.
Awesome.
So one kind of a downer thing is that here in Spokane, so the state of Washington did this whole reorganizing of funding for schools because there was a Supreme Court decision called the McCleary decision that said, you're not doing a good job fully funding public education as a state. Mm-hmm. And so this idea was that they were going to fully fund education, send more money to the schools. And so the teachers' unions came out and heavily fought for increases in salary, increases that we're supposed to get as a public employee, a cost of living increase.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our pay. And here in Spokane, we haven't had one for many, many years. Like my coworker said he hasn't had one in 15 years.
Oh, jeez.
So when we were bargaining for these higher salaries, we're like, this has to happen. Mm-hmm. So now the districts are saying, because of this new way that the schools are funded, the districts are saying we're going to have this shortfall of funding, which is true because they put a cap on how much you can tax the property owners. And like some districts are going to come like $14 million short, like
Jeez.
A ton of money.
That's detrimental. Yeah.
So the Spokane School District, which is the second largest school district in the state of Washington. We
got hit hard.
Yes. Spokane Public Schools. They laid off 325 employees. 182 of those are teachers. And of those teachers, they eliminated every librarian.
Jeez.
And that is just a fucking travesty.
Yeah. It's a miracle that you didn't lose your job.
Well, I don't work in Spokane Public Schools, so that helps. I work in a small district outside of the city, and we're a very low income school district. But our union was the first union to negotiate and settle a contract.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
And we settled way lower than everybody else because we were the first ones. So everybody else was higher than us. And that's real shitty. It sucks. Like I get paid almost $15,000 less than what my same exact counterparts do here in the city. that's a lot of money.
That is.
Like, I live in the city, so like my money doesn't stretch very far. So that sucks, but it does mean that we weren't in as bad of a position financially in our district because we didn't negotiate as high as some of those other places. But guys, like, I know most of you listening, obviously, you're interested in learning and in things, like being smart. Just so you know, like, librarians and libraries are not just about like books. It's not a room full of books. It's a place of creativity and curiosity and learning and growth. And librarians serve a really important function in a school. And statistics have shown repeatedly over the last few years that this trend of eliminating librarians is negatively impacting students in huge and significant ways. It is decreasing their reading abilities, their reading scores on standardized tests, their overall testing scores, and that minority children are more severely impacted than white students. So whenever schools have a certified librarian, when all things are compared, the school that has a certified librarian versus a school that does not always has higher test scores, better attendance rates, better reading abilities across the board. They stay in school longer. They have more kids who go to post-secondary education. Like, it is a big deal.
Yeah.
That one position being eliminated and just having a random person in there that doesn't know what they're doing.
That's terrifying that happened. All of them.
All of them.
All of them.
It's just a travesty. So if you also agree with me, you should definitely write to your senators, your legislators, and get out there and make some phone calls. Tell a teacher you support them. And also, if you're not living in the state of Washington, you should check. Yeah. Go figure out, like, who's running your library in your kid's school or in your niece or nephew's schools or whatever, because that position matters. It does a lot of work and a lot of good in a school, and eliminating it does a lot of damage.
And also support your local libraries too.
Oh yeah, our public library here
is the shit.
It's so fucking amazing. Like, you talk about equalizers, like, having a really good public library can really help people who are in need. Our public library, the downtown branch, is run by a friend of ours, Jason Johnson, who's also in a band called Buffalo Jones.
Which is amazing.
Yeah, and he runs a television show through the library called Lilac City Live. And he has implemented so many incredible programs through our public library that help people. All people.
Really making a difference here in Spokane.
They offer a whole library of things, including a Discover Pass, which is a permit that you have to have in your car to be able to go to any of the state parks. So if you're a family that's poor and you want to go take your kids on a hike and you can't afford this pass, you can go to the library and rent it for free.
You can check it out. Yeah.
They also offer free music lessons. Music lessons are so expensive.
Yeah, they are.
They have free guitar lessons.
And that's usually something people of means can afford for their children.
Yeah.
And so somebody, who doesn't even have the money to get an instrument, a basic instrument, you can go and do that for free. That is amazing.
We talk about so many people on this podcast who have such incredible talents. Imagine if every kid who had that kind of level of talent had access to teachers, to instruments, to things that will help them grow.
To opportunity.
They're actually putting in a recording studio in the library.
Oh, that's so cool.
So a kid, let's say a poor kid who has some talent, can go get guitar lessons and start to really hone that talent, and then go and make their own single in the library.
So cool.
I mean, guys, our library is amazing, and I'm trying to blueprint what they're doing at the city level in a sort of micro level at the school. And I have an office attached to the library, but I hardly ever spend any time in my office because I like to be out in the space with the kids. And so I'm going to write a grant to turn it into a studio.
Ooh, that would be so cool.
Right? So I already have all of this film equipment because I used to teach film and I wrote a grant for that. So I brought the equipment with me when I changed jobs. And I'm like, this would be a great place to have a recording,
like a media
audio
center.
editing. Yeah, a media center, like where we actually, you could come in and make videos
Oh
and
my
audit
gosh.
that.
Miss Mead's Media Center.
So guys, support your local library, support your teachers, support your schools. It's so important. And tell your legislators to get their heads out of their asses and fix this shit.
Yeah, you want to make a difference? Make some noise.
Yeah. Okay, so on to our ladies. We both have, I think, probably pretty incredible women, as we normally do. Mm-hmm. We already discussed earlier that one of us has a short one and one of us has a long one. Mm-hmm. So what would you rather do first, long or short?
I'll go first. Mine's a little shorter.
Okay.
Alrighty. So I'm wondering, I don't know, this might be the day. You might have heard of this one. I'm not sure, this woman.
I'm excited.
Nanny of the Maroons. Queen Nanny.
I have never heard of her.
Freedom fighter for Jamaica.
Ooh.
I know. I was like, I have never heard of this woman, and this research was really, really interesting. So Nanny was born in Ghana in Western Africa to the Ashanti tribe. Her actual birth date is unknown. It's thought to be circa 1686.
That's a long time ago.
And she is a slave, so it's not, I mean, their birth dates aren't really known. And I'm going to already preempt in this, a lot of Nanny's story has been a lot of oral history because they didn't write a lot down. So it's passed down from like person to person, family to family. So she was brought to Jamaica with her 4 brothers as a slave. She was sold to a plantation just outside of the St. Thomas parish. And at that time, most of the plantations were cutting and producing sugarcane. And I don't know if you've ever seen how sugarcane is cut and processed.
I think I saw something about it once. Isn't it really painful?
It is painful. It's super labor intensive.
Yeah, don't you have to like hit the stalks multiple times?
Yeah, it's a machete that you have to be bent over and you're cutting at the base of the stalk and you're just hacking away. And if you can imagine in Jamaica, it's extremely hot.
And
then
humid.
also producing the sugar cane, you're boiling it. It's really hazardous. It's not fun, especially when you're doing it for the enrichment of someone else.
Yeah, and you're forced into it.
You're forced to do it.
And you're under inhumane conditions.
So learning from other slaves, Nanny and her brothers heard of the Maroons that lived in the Blue Mountains of Jamaica. The Maroons were slaves who escaped and had formed independent settlements and free communities up in the rugged jungles in Jamaica.
How cool is that?
It was super cool. And it was like, these jungles are extremely difficult to navigate. So if you didn't know the land and you didn't know like how to survive on that land, you weren't native to it, it was extremely difficult.
Yeah.
So Nanny and her 4 brothers and several other slaves escaped from the plantation that they were on. And they went to the Blue Mountains and jungles in Jamaica. In 1720, Nanny's influence over the Maroons was strong. They believe that she was connected to powers that they call the Obeah, which Obeah is the African spiritual practice of healing. So like this, it was a very honored practice too, like very spiritual based. And if you had this gift, you were seen as an honored person.
So did she do something? Like, is there any, so you're going to get to that. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, so she was already like,
she's like, hey guys, I've got
sorry
powers.
about that.
So one of her talents was she possessed a wide knowledge of herbs and other traditional healing methods.
Oh, we've had like a
healer.
couple of women like this
Yeah.
now. When I talked about the woman who circumnavigated the globe.
Oh, yeah.
That was her thing.
Was that Jeanne?
Yeah. Jean.
Jean?
I don't remember.
That's right. And so these healing methods were practiced by the Africans and Native Islanders. And she served as a physical and spiritual healer in her community, which in turn really gave her like a high status and a lot of esteem with her tribe. She and her brothers decided to split up and organize more Maroon communities across Jamaica. So her brother Cujo went to the St. James Parish and he organized a village over there. And then her other brother, Akampong, settled in St. Elizabeth Parish, making his town over there. And then her other brother, I don't know his name, he formed a parish or like a community. And then her other brother, Quao, he stayed in the Blue Mountains with her, but she became the leader. And so they called it Nanny Town.
That's cool.
Yeah. So Nanny became known for her exceptional leadership skills. She was a small, wiry woman, they said, with fierce, piercing eyes. And she also had a knack for guerrilla warfare.
Nice.
Yeah. One tactic in particular that they talked about that she really used and was really good at was she would camouflage everybody with plants. She would like tie them to their legs and make these like with cloth and leaves and stuff. She would make almost like, what do you call those now? People use those to like hunt.
Oh, like a gully suit?
Is it a ghillie?
Ghillie, yeah.
Yeah,
Ghillie suit?
it was almost like a ghillie suit. So they would match with the jungle, which I mean, that's brilliant.
So what's the guerrilla warfare for? Like,
the war is with the British that were occupying there.
Yeah, fuck those British.
Was the British interests who, of course, are running the plantations. They're running the military there, and they're trying to make money. And so these people, what she did was she would use the layouts of the mountains to their advantage. So the British would try and come to get them back. And they would get like all lost and befuddled, and they would attack them and send them back down the mountain. So they were actually in a really good position too, because it was high up in the mountains and they had a better line of sight than people coming up.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's really smart.
Very smart. She also arranged posting lookouts. So she had people in strategic places, and she had everybody organized to sound an alarm by making these horns. And they would blow the horn and it would alert everybody to when the British were coming.
Yeah. That's great.
So, I mean, that's called, tactical procedures.
And that's been in warfare forever. Mm-hmm. But it's cool that they were doing it, like they had lookouts and things like that.
In the 1700s.
Yeah. And I'm glad that they're fighting against the British, because the British, destroyed Jamaica.
Yeah. Well, they were trying to reclaim these people as property and bring them back to their owners.
Yeah, it's
and
gross.
They were like, no. So her cleverness in planning guerrilla warfare confused the British immensely. There's a lot of accounts written of them being surprised and fearful. Like they would run around them and create a lot of noise and like disorient them. So really that's kind of cool. She led, it said, limited raids on plantations where they would gather weapons and food. They would burn the plantations down.
Oh my God.
And they would lead other slaves to join them in the mountains. So Nanny was highly successful at organizing plans to free slaves. And during her time as leader, she was credited with freeing more than 1,000 slaves and helping them resettle in their maroon communities. So they were all branched out. So she would send some people there. She'd send some people here to her brother's communities that they started. And then she would take some in her own.
Yeah, that's also like urban planning or whatever.
So under this, what they called their spiritual military leader, Nanny Town flourished. The community raised animals, they hunted, they grew crops, and Nanny encouraged trade to nearby market towns in exchange for food, or they would exchange food for weapons and cloth and things, just trade to, help them survive. She actually preferred this peaceful trading to the violence that happened with raiding, because some of her people would get hurt. And I mean, it was unnecessary, but I think that's why they said it was limited, because she wasn't always what she wanted to do, but she did it. She also really encouraged her community to pass down legends and encourage the continuation of their customs, their music, and their songs. That's
great. As we know, like if you destroy culture, you destroy the entire people.
You destroy their identity.
Yeah. I mean, we saw that happen to tribes in the U.S.
Absolutely. So these songs and the music and the customs came with these people from Africa, and she said that it instilled confidence and pride in them. And it's that's your identity. It's like who you are. And I like that she encouraged her people to embrace that.
Well, and it brings people together, and you become more united and more, stronger when you have a connection to each other, that you have a tradition and, culture. Yeah, that's really, it was really smart on her part.
Absolutely. So as the Maroons grew in their numbers, the British colonial administration began to become threatened, of course, and they were really embarrassed that these people were able to succeed.
Yeah, to thwart them.
And to thrive. How dare they?
Yeah, how dare they?
Yeah. So complaints piled up too of the plantation owners who were losing slaves, they were losing crops, and they were losing property. So they demanded that the colonial authorities act. So the threat of the Maroon tribes brought the British interests like to a boiling point, and they declared war on all the tribes.
Ugh.
So
And of course, they have like more modern warfare techniques, which means that they're definitely like outnumbered and probably outmaneuvered in terms of
and outweaponed.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this war was called the First Maroon War. Hunting parties made up of British regular army soldiers, militiamen, and mercenaries. And a lot of these mercenaries were made, they said that they would free blacks, but then they would have them like fight for them. So these mercenaries were like hired freed slaves. Yeah, so kind of.
Was it like, if you fight for us, that'll earn your freedom?
I think that's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah, so you're free, but you're not really free.
Yeah, and also you cannot trust a colonial.
No.
You can't trust colonizers. They're always lying.
Exactly.
Like,
so you could be free, so I could use you for the moment, and then as soon as this shit's over, back in the box.
also, you're only really not really free anyway, because like you could be killed.
Yeah.
That's not much freedom.
Yeah.
There's actually a really cool young adult book that just came out recently called Dread Nation.
Dread Nation. Okay.
And it's set during the Civil War, the United States Civil War. And it's during one of the major battles of the Civil War, which obviously we all know, if you're unclear, you need to go back to your history books, was fought over slavery, right?
Yeah.
And in the story, it's like in the middle of battle, the dead soldiers start rising up and coming after the living soldiers. And so they have to pause the Civil War.
What?
Because they're like, holy shit, zombies. And the way that the government decides to try to like fight these zombie soldiers is to take Native and Black people, young people, and put them in these like training camps to become zombie fighters.
Oh.
And so it's very similar to this idea of like they're freeing them but not really freeing them, and the main character is a teenage girl who leads a rebellion.
Ooh. Wow, this sounds interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's on my list of to be read in the future. As soon as you started talking about this, I was like, gosh, that reminds me of this book. And you should support that book because it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting concept.
Yeah.
I'd never even thought about that.
No, I would love to read that. Yeah. You should too, guys. So one of the captains that was leading the army was Captain William Coffee, known as Captain Sambo. He is credited of having killed Nanny in 1733 during one of the many bloody engagements that was happening during the war.
Is this a British guy?
Yes.
Oh, fuck him.
So the war itself lasted from 1720 until a truce was declared in 1739.
Whoa,
So
how many years is that?
19 years.
19 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
And just all this conflict. And it was Nanny's brother, Cujo, one of the leaders during the Maroon War, that was the driving force behind the treaty. I did read a little bit into the treaty. It was one of those treaties of like, we'll give you land, we'll give you, in quotations, freedom, but it was the same thing. You guys have to fight for us. If anybody comes onto the island, you have to be part of our military and fight these people off. And it was still self-serving. So that's why it's called the First Maroon War, because there's actually a second one.
Oh.
Yeah.
Did they win the second one?
The second one did.
Yes.
I know, because they revisited the treaty and they were like, you know what? This is bullshit. So after Nanny's death, many of the Blue Mountain Maroons moved across the island to the more sparsely inhabited western or leeward side of Jamaica. Nanny Town was captured by the British and destroyed in 1734. They're trying to erase her memory. So Nanny's life and accomplishments have been recognized by the government of Jamaica, and she has been honored as a national hero and awarded the title of Right Excellent. Currently in Jamaica, there are only 7 national heroes. Nanny is one of them, and she is the only woman.
Oh, yes. That's so cool. Yeah.
So Nanny is hailed by many for her active role in fighting slavery and protecting her Black community. Nanny is celebrated in Jamaica by the government declared Queen Nanny a national hero. And they also put her portrait on the $500 Jamaican bill, which is the largest bill in circulation in Jamaica.
Who has one of those?
A $500 bill.
What? That is absurd.
I don't know the ratios for their money, so I don't know. It could be $50. I don't know.
But, well, that doesn't, I mean, even if it's like the value is lower, it would still be like, it's still $500 to you.
Yeah, true.
Who has a fucking $500 bill? Just lying around. I mean, I guess that means that she's got high status.
True. So Nanny's monument is located in the Moortown, Portland, Jamaica. Nannyville Gardens is a residential community located in Kingston, Jamaica, and was founded in 1977 and named after her.
Very cool.
The Gilder Lehrman Center for the Study of Slavery, Resistance, and Abolition at Yale University in the U.S. uses Nanny's portrait as their logo.
Oh, that's so awesome.
I didn't know that.
I had no idea.
And the center sponsors research and conferences on slavery in America.
Yaleys, did you guys know that?
I did not know that.
Well, we didn't know that. We don't go to Yale.
Yaleys.
Yaleys.
So I know it was a quick one, but I really did like Nanny's history and what she did for her people. It was really brave.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I love rebels.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like the epitome of a rebel.
And man, Jamaica has been so, it's the same with what happened with Hawaii.
Yeah,
these islands
destroyed
are just
by
destroyed
colonials,
by slavery and trade, and all in the name of
and
money.
British colonialism.
Yep. So I got a lot of information from blackpast.org, the Jamaican Information Service, genie.com. I got a little bit from Wikipedia. And then I got Jamaicas.com/Queen Nanny is a great site. And actually Queen Nanny does have her own website.
Very cool.
That's Queen Nanny.
Thank you for sharing about Queen Nanny. I like women who are badass and just fucking take them by the balls,
Take
right?
the reins. Nice.
So right. I'm going to tell you about Ruth Prawer Jhabvala.
I don't know her.
Okay, so Ruth was the first woman to win 2 Academy Awards for Adapted Screenplay and the only person who's ever won an Oscar and a Booker Prize.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Ruth Prawer was born in Cologne, Germany in 1927 into a fairly wealthy assimilated Jewish family. So 1927, picture yourself in the era in Germany.
Okay.
Jewish. Just keep this in mind.
All right.
And when I say assimilated, so...
Yeah, I was just going to ask.
So there were like Jewish people, particularly from Eastern Europe. In Eastern Europe, Eastern Jews were often like, had their own communities and they would be very traditional. But her family was westernized, I guess you would say. Like,
okay.
So they were just assimilated into German culture. So basically unrecognizable between any other wealthy family.
Yeah.
They just happened to also be Jewish. And in fact, they were very patriotic Germans. Her grandfather was actually a pretty prominent Jewish leader in the community. He was a cantor at a really big Cologne synagogue. Ooh. Cantors are the people who lead chants and prayers and songs, which is similar in the Catholic Church, right?
Yeah, we have cantors.
Yeah,
some are good, some are fucking terrible. Me and this little side note, me and Nick always are real snarky and in church sometimes. To the cantors, yeah. About the cantors.
Yes. See, I didn't grow up Catholic. I grew up evangelical. Hard to believe. I know.
Whoa.
Yeah, like those crazy ass churches that hate gay people and abortion. Grew up in that.
Oh, friend fact.
Yeah. I was devoted too. Like I used to go to those, those like concerts you see on like those crazy Christian shows. Whoa. Where like the people are singing and everybody's like swaying and then like they come down and put hands on you too. And stuff. Yeah, I used to go to that shit all the time. Terrible. So anyway, I did not know what a cantor was when I first read this. I had an idea. I was like, I think those are the people that like do stuff up front, but I just wasn't sure. So her grandfather was a cantor, so he was like really well known. They were a well-known family. Her mother was a woman named Eleonora Cohn Prawer, and her father, Marcus Prawer, was a lawyer who had left Poland during World War I to escape forced service in the military.
Oh.
So we've talked in the past about how anti-Semitic Poland and Russia were before, like during World War I.
Absolutely. And people were getting the heck out of there.
Yeah, he wanted to get out of there. Ruth entered school the year Hitler came to power in Germany.
So how old was she then? Like maybe like
6 or whatever.
6 or 7. Okay.
So when she would walk to school, she would be taunted as Jew, and people would throw things at her. This is like, as she's starting to go to school, this is happening to her.
Jeez.
Hitler's come to power. People are taunting her. When she was 6, she was asked by a teacher to write a composition in school about a rabbit. And this is what she said about it. I wrote the title Der Hass. At once, I was flooded with my destiny. Only I didn't know that that's what it was. I only remember my entire absorption, delight in writing about Der Hass. To think that such happiness could be. So she realizes at this young age, she loves to write.
Yeah.
After that, she wrote constantly. She was stuffing cupboards full of unfinished novels and plays and stories. Like her parents would like open up a cupboard and like paper would come tumbling out. And they were always like, she'd be in the middle of a story and she'd like write a new story. And so she was always writing.
The creative juices were flowing.
I mentioned earlier that her family were assimilated and they were pretty patriotic. But that didn't matter because the Nazis did not see them as true Germans. So one day in 1934, as they sat on their balcony overlooking Cologne's main avenue, they watched Nazis parade past. And that night, her parents were arrested on suspicions that they were communists or communist sympathizers. After that, her father was like, we need to get the fuck out of here. This shit is bad. But her mom was like, I think it'll get better. Let's just stay.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So her dad was like, I see the writing on the wall. We need to get out of here. And then the family witnessed and lived through Kristallnacht in 1938. Are you familiar with Kristallnacht?
No, I am not.
It's the German word. It's a German word, but it roughly translates to the night of broken glass. Oh. And on that night in 1938, all across the entire country of Germany, there were these, you can't really call it a riot because a riot involves other people. The Germans, the Nazis, like, not soldiers, like just everyday fucking people.
Is that when they did home invasions?
Yep, home invasions.
Okay.
They went to businesses threw rocks through the businesses, tagged everything as dirty Jews, like destroyed, set shit on fire, just destroyed every bit of like stuff they could that was owned by Jews. And tons of people got arrested. Like tons of Jews were just like dragged out of their homes and arrested. It was just, it was the turning point, really. Yeah. Kristallnacht. It was a really terrible night. And they witnessed it. They witnessed it happen right before their eyes. After that, it became urgent that they leave.
They weren't targeted, though?
It didn't say anything about them specifically being targeted, but they obviously knew people and they had witnessed things. After that, they were like, now we need to get the fuck out of here. And they were not able to get visas for the United States. So the Prawer family escaped to England in 1939. And they were one of the last groups of refugees who were able to escape Nazi Germany.
Wow, they barely made it.
They barely fucking made it. And Ruth was only 12 at the time.
Jeez.
And one thing to note about those, when I say one of those last groups, like there was this conference called the Evian Conference that happened in Evian, France. And all of the major countries attended. And the United States didn't even bother sending a real person, a real government person. Yeah, it was like a friend of the president's.
Oh my God.
Came to represent the United States. And basically everybody at the conference was like, we don't want to take Jews. Do you want to take Jews? No, we don't want to take any Jews. We're going to put a cap on Jews. And everybody did that. Jeez. And like, that's one of the reasons why so many Jewish people died is because all of these countries shut their doors to them.
Yeah.
Including the United States.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah.
History repeating itself.
I wonder what that sounds like.
Yep.
So during the war, obviously, you know that the war didn't just stay in Germany. or Eastern
No,
Europe,
yeah, it
it
spread.
follows them to England. And during this time, they actually are in London and they experience the Blitz, which was when they like just rained fire down on London and like destroyed half the city.
God, it's just following them. Yeah.
And Ruth at the time, because she's from Germany, she doesn't even know any English. So when they get to England, she's 12 years old, doesn't know a word of English. So she does what any obvious 12-year-old would do. She just started reading in English. She spent the war, like when they would like hunker down when bombs were going down, or they would have air raids and stuff.
Yeah.
They would hunker down and she would just read
Wow.
during that. So she taught herself how to read in English, and she would read a lot of Charles Dickens, but her favorite book was Gone with the Wind.
Oh, I love that book.
Ruth officially became a British citizen in 1948 after the war was over. That year, so it's 1948, the war ended in 1945, so they've had a little bit of time post-war. Mm-hmm. Marcus, which is Ruth's father, he is finally able to learn what happened to his family. Because for like 3 years after, everybody was just like, who knows, you know?
Well,
yeah,
it was impossible.
It took a long time to really track down what happened to everybody. So Marcus learns that every single member of his family, more than 40 in all, had been murdered in the camps.
Oh my God. Everybody.
Every single person. Mm. And I imagine that he felt not only all of that grief all at once, but probably a lot of guilt because he left and he got out. And that same year, he died by suicide.
Oh, Jesus.
Ruth was studying English literature at Queen Mary College at the time, and she just carried on, and she received, by this point, a master's in English literature in 1951. She came to consider English her first language. She had become so talented in it.
Yeah.
And her brother, Siegbert, which is funny, right? So she's like really big into English. Her brother is studying modern languages at Cambridge, and he would go on to become a professor of German literature, and he felt like German was the language. I imagine their dinner parties involve lots of arguments. In 2 languages.
In 2 languages, yeah.
At a party in 1949, Ruth met Cyrus Jhabvala. He was an Indian Parsi architect who was in England studying architecture. The two fell in love and became engaged. And 2 years later, they married and settled in Delhi, India in 1951. So I looked up Parsi, and it's like, it's sort of a kind of Indian person. Like, I don't know how to describe it in what America would be. But it was like a specific kind of like
an area, maybe?
No, like a person. Like if you said, like in the United States, you could be like, oh, I'm an American, but I'm also Blackfeet.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's like
well,
a
that's
whole...
how I identify. It's like I'm Mexican, but I'm Mexican American.
Right.
You know, I'm not of Mexican or I'm American of Mexican descent. Is usually what I say. Yeah.
So it's kind of like that. Like they're a whole sort of cultural and race ethnicity thing.
Got it.
I'm real intelligent today, guys. Race and ethnicity thing. God, if you can send us hate mail over that, I'll allow. I know. I should have done a better job at that. So the couple, Ruth and Cyrus, would have 3 daughters over the years, and Ruth really like threw herself into Indian culture when she first arrived in India, and she learned how to cook in Indian food, and she would wear saris, and she even learned how to write in Hindu.
Did they ever have any conflict for them being an interracial couple?
It doesn't sound like it. He was a very prominent person. He was from a well-known family. But I imagine there probably was a little bit of friction there with like marrying a white Jew. Yeah. A white European Jew.
Probably like, Mom, this is what I want to do.
I think it also helped that Ruth was like really like when she got there, she was like immersed herself in Indian culture and at first like just loved everything about India. She published her first novel in 1955 and it was called To Whom She Will. When it was published in the United States, they changed it to Amrita, which I think is the name of the main character.
Okay.
And it was about this young Indian woman from a good family who fell in love with the wrong man.
Ooh. Sounds saucy.
Yeah. And a lot of people, because of the way that she wrote about India and like really got it and like really understood the various workings of like culture and stuff, people, and because her last name was Jhabvala, like people thought she was Indian.
Oh, okay.
For a lot of her career. And she wasn't. She became really popular as a short story writer because her fiction started appearing in The New Yorker. And even in India, people thought she was Indian.
Wow.
When they would read her stuff. So like she would constantly have to correct that.
Obviously.
And then I'm sure when people came to readings, they were like, wait, what?
Wait. Where is she?
At the time, when her fiction started appearing, people started comparing her to Jane Austen.
Wow.
That's how good of a writer she is. She had a very satirical voice and a really great wit, and it was very similar to the style that Jane Austen wrote in. She published her third novel, The Householder, in 1960, and it was this book that caught the attention of two young aspiring filmmakers, Ismail Merchant and James Ivory. So they call up Ruth and they're like, hey, we'd like to turn The Householder into a movie. And she like is on the phone with them and is like, I am not this Ruth person. I am her mother-in-law.
Why did she do that?
Because she was like, this is not, I don't want this.
She's like, I don't want to do this.
It sounds like she was just really nervous about the whole thing. It was like, I don't know how to do this. So they just show up one day at her house in 1961.
Because of course they probably want this. Yeah.
They were like relentless. And so she pretends at first to be the maid.
Oh my God.
When they show up. So they were like, And eventually they convince her that she should not only let them make her book into a movie, but they want her to write the screenplay.
Oh, that would be even better. Because they don't always do that.
No, they don't.
They don't.
They often they treat the author of the book like they were they just were like a little piece of the chessboard instead of like the whole thing.
Go hang out at the craft food station. We'll make the movie.
Yeah. So they ask her to write the screenplay. And at first she's like, I've never done that. And I don't want to do that. Like, I don't know how to do it. And they were like, it doesn't matter. We've never made a movie either.
Like, let's all do this together.
Oh, I forgot to mention that it's these two men, right? Ismail Merchant and James Ivory. Merchant is Indian.
Okay.
And so he's really attracted to her story. And he, like a lot of people, felt like she really nailed cultural stuff that like he was surprised by and really loves the way she writes. And so, and the other guy, James Ivory, is white. I think they're English.
Okay.
They might both be English. So she wrote the script in 8 days flat.
My goodness, you just hole up in a hotel somewhere and just write?
So the film that was made from her screenplay, first up, 8 days.
How can you write that much in 8 days?
8 days to write a whole movie? Fuck.
Yikes.
I've been working on a novel for like 5 years.
I've never finished a piece of writing.
So the film made from her screenplay was the first feature film for all three of them. It was black and white, and it was based on her novel about the trials of a young Indian husband. It was released in the United States in 1963. The trio then subsequently released more films that they wrote, produced, and directed. So she was always their writer. They were always directing and producing.
Nice.
So there was Shakespeare Walla in 1965, The Guru in 1969, and Bombay Talkie in 1970. Despite the fact that screenwriting was becoming a lucrative and career for her, and she was really highly praised for her screenplays, Ruth saw screenwriting as a hobby. She
liked her more serious writing, probably.
Yeah, she felt her real work was prose, her short stories and her novels. So she thought this is like a fun little hobby she did on the side. So she was continuing to write novels and stories that were published widely across India, the UK, and America. And in 1975, she won the Booker Prize, which is now called the Man Booker Prize, but she won the Booker Prize for her novel Heat and Dust. The Booker Prize is awarded every year to the best original novel written in the English language and published in the UK.
Wow.
And that book was later adapted into a film. And the film version of her Booker Prize winning novel is the movie that breaks them out of, because they were making all these like tiny little black and white films. They were really great, but they were being mostly shown in like art house theaters. So it wasn't widely known. Like their films weren't being like seen by wide audiences.
Yeah.
So the one that they make out of Heat and Dust, her Booker Prize winning novel, that becomes popular. That breaks them out of these art house theaters, and they get the opportunity to make a big one.
They get the ball rolling. Nice.
This actually won her a BAFTA award for Best Adapted Screenplay in 1983, was Heat and Dust. And the BAFTAs are like the British version of the Oscars. Ruth was becoming increasingly disillusioned with India at this point. She's starting to hate living there.
Why?
She was quoted as saying that she felt that India was steeped in poverty and backwardness.
Interesting.
I was reading this interview with her that had been done around the time, like right after she left, or not that long after she left India. And she really spoke negatively of the country. When she first got there, she was really enamored with like all of the, it's like colorful and busy and these different foods and things like that. But over time, she felt like all of that was like
surface.
It was stifling to her. And also she felt like it was garish. Like all of these bright colors and these smells and stuff are actually just like gross to her. And she just had really negative things to say about India.
That's interesting.
I thought so too.
Do you think it was partly because she saw the poverty and it bothered her? Or do you think it irritated, like it annoyed her?
I think it was about the fact that the poverty was so pervasive.
Overwhelming.
And that nobody was ever doing anything to try to fix it in any real remarkable way. And I think she just became disillusioned by the vast class divide because she's married to this wealthy architect who's from a prominent Indian Parsi family. So she gets to see both sides, right? When she's walking to go to the market, she sees these like shirtless, shoeless, dirty children who are skinny and begging for food.
And how can you live with yourself?
And like pulling at her and stuff, right? And then she'll see like all of these really well-dressed women on the other side of the coin. And I think she just got really disillusioned by this like vast poverty that was never getting addressed properly. That's it. Sort of basically what I was like reading in her words. That's what I took her to mean, is that she just was like, it's so corrupt. It's so steeped in poverty. It's so backwards. Like, I don't necessarily know that she was a feminist, but I think that she was not a fan of how, because she said it was backwards as well. Okay. So I think she was also getting really irritated with like expectations about what women should do and what women look like and the agency that they're not allowed to have. And I think there's a lot of that going on.
Yeah. And she already escaped so much oppression. She's like, I'm not going to do it again.
Yeah. Not that it was the same, but I think that definitely she was like, I'm not putting up with this. So she used the prize money that she got from the Booker Prize to move to New York. Oh. Where she bought an apartment on the Upper East Side in the same building as Ivory and Merchant. So they become like tight. Yeah. These three. And Ruth falls in love with New York. It reminded her of Europe. She would be able to go down the street and find delis that sold the same kind of pickled cucumbers and potato salad and herring that she used to get in Europe. And the apartments in New York were filled with European furniture. And there were lots of European immigrants in New York City, lots of Jewish people. Like she would hear people speaking multiple languages. So she just loved New York. So Ruth and her husband, Job, as she called him, they made their marriage work long distance.
Oh, I was going to say, did he go?
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, he probably wouldn't. No, he didn't.
She would travel to India in the summers and he would make frequent trips to New York throughout the rest of the year. Okay. I thought that was pretty impressive.
Very.
Like, their marriage, they were obviously very devoted to each other. So this is where her career as a screenwriter kind of takes off, right? So this movie takes her out of the art house theaters, and now she's got big success. So in 1986, Ruth won her first Academy Award for her screenplay, A Room with a View. Have you heard of that?
I have.
Yeah, I'd heard of it, but it came out in 86, so obviously we were not watching it.
Yeah.
It starred Maggie Smith, Helena Bonham Carter, Judi Dench, and Daniel Day-Lewis, amongst others.
Wow.
Like, these are big
That's some big players,
folks.
yeah.
It was a period piece about these two young star-crossed lovers who have a chance meeting in Florence, Italy. She was also nominated for her second BAFTA award for this film. After this win, Ruth is the first person and only person to ever win the Booker Prize and an Oscar.
Wow.
In 1992, so 1986, she wins her first Academy Award. 92, she wins again for Howard's End.
Oh, I love that movie.
Yeah, they just did a remastered version of it on Netflix.
Oh, really?
It looks really good.
Nice.
I think it was that one. Yeah, it's that one. And that's another British period piece, and it was confronting like class systems in the early 20th century, starring Vanessa Redgrave, Helena Bonham Carter, and Emma Thompson, Anthony Hopkins. I haven't seen Howard's End. I wanted to watch it before I talked about her, but I wasn't able to make time.
It's a great movie.
Tell me about it.
I watched it when I'm going to save it for you. I watched it when I was like really, really young, and I thought it was like really like dramatic and spicy. Like, I'm not supposed to watch this. And then I can't wait to watch the remaster one, but no, I'm going to let you watch it and then we're going to catch up on it.
Okay. Maybe like in a couple of episodes, we'll be able to do that. So that she won her second Academy Award for Howard's End, and that was also nominated for a BAFTA.
Jeez.
Yeah, so she's racking up these nominations. Yeah. So after this win, Ruth becomes the first woman to win twice in the adapted screenplay category of the Academy Awards. At the time, there were only 2 other women who'd ever won 2 Oscars, and she became the first woman to ever win 2 Oscars in a non-acting category.
Wow.
The other 2 who had won 2 Oscars were actresses Elizabeth Taylor and Bette Davis.
Oh, wow.
So just a year later, Ruth is nominated for another Oscar and a Golden Globe for her adaptation of The Remains of the Day. She didn't win that year, but that's a lot of nominations.
Yeah.
So for Ruth and Merchant and Ivory, they continued to write, direct, and produce films. Over the course of the next 40 years, Ruth made 22 films with Merchant and Ivory, many of which were critically acclaimed.
Wow.
Yeah, 22 films.
That's a lot. And as a writer, too.
She also wrote 20 novels and story collections. And for her writing, she won the Neil Gunn Prize in 1979. She won a MacArthur Fellowship in 1984.
Holy shit.
And the O. Henry Prize for her story Refuge in London in 2003.
Wow.
Yeah, so she's just a prolific writer.
Yeah.
And obviously extremely talented.
Writing is so hard to get recognized in.
Mm-hmm.
That's amazing.
In 1986, she became a naturalized citizen in the United States, and that meant that she had dual British and American citizenship. I thought that was really cool. In 1998, she was made a Commander of the Order of the British Empire for her service to literature, which is the highest honor a civilian can earn in Britain. Despite the accolades and success, I thought this was really interesting. She always still felt like she was an outsider.
Really?
She said this to The Guardian in 2005. Once a refugee, always a refugee. I can't ever remember not being all right where I was, but you don't give your whole allegiance to a place or want to be entirely identified with the society you're living in.
Wow. That's profound.
And I think it's really sad.
It's really sad. Well, she just never felt safe.
Yeah. And it was curious. There was only one, she never talked about her upbringing. She never talked about being a Jew in Germany during World War II. She wouldn't even answer the questions about it. There was only one time that she really addressed it, and it was in like the 80s. And that was when she's like, I don't live anywhere. I'll never be home.
Wow.
Her last published story was called The Judge's Will, and it appeared in The New Yorker on March 25th, 2013.
Wow.
She died just a few days later on April 3rd, 2013 from complications of a pulmonary disease at the age of 85.
Nice long life, though.
So what's interesting is that Merchant and Ivory, they have this production company, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even though she wrote a ton of their films, she was never included in like whenever they would talk about Merchant and Ivory in these amazing films, they would never talk about her as being the third component, even though that's how everything started.
Yeah.
It was super disrespectful. Like I went through all of this stuff, like, and it wasn't their fault. Like it wasn't Merchant and Ivory's fault. Like it was the way that they talked about the films, and they would act like the director and the producer were the only people involved. And it didn't matter how many times that she was paired with them to do these projects. She was never receiving the same recognition as the two of them.
Without the story, you don't have a fucking movie.
I mean, like, as someone who loves film, I didn't even know her name.
Neither did I.
And I think that's a travesty. When she died, the Merchant Ivory production company released a statement that said this: Ruth was a beloved member of the Merchant Ivory family since 1960, comprising 1/3 of our indomitable trifecta that included director James Ivory and late producer Ismail Merchant. Her death is a significant loss to the global film community.
That's a nice statement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I got my information from obituaries in The Guardian and The New York Times, Wikipedia, her biography on the Jewish Women's Archive, and a New Yorker article titled Ruth Prawer Jhabvala and the Art of Ambivalence.
That was great.
Yeah.
I love that one.
Now you have some movies to watch, right? We're
There
going to
we
watch
go.
Remains of the Day, A Room with a View, Howard's End.
We should just have a day.
Yeah, we should have a
We should have a
marathon of
marathon.
Ruth Prawer Jhabvala's work.
We should. Wow. And that name is like, you couldn't not like hear that name and not remember it. Be like, oh yeah, that writer.
She had 3. So this is really funny, right? This is just an anecdote, side note that I was going to put in my notes, and I was like, it's not really, but I thought it was really interesting. So she, started out in England, like London, and then India, and then America. Mm-hmm. And she had 3 daughters. Mm-hmm. And they each, like, because of the ages that they were born, like the first one married an English man, the second one married an Indian man, and the third one married an American man.
That's pretty cool.
It's just like a random fact. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. Because she said that quote about like, once a refugee, always a refugee. I think because she did that, each of her daughters also were kind of moralists, right? Like they didn't have the roots. And that's how they found their roots.
And just free flowing.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting too how you said about the recognition part of it. Because when I was looking up information about Nanny, she was part of the first Maroon War. A lot of the information talked about the second one, which her brother was the one that led the treaty writing. And a lot of information was just all about him.
Oh, and they just ignored her.
Ignored the first war, the one that she was killed in, and ignored her name even.
Ugh.
Yeah,
This is why we're doing this.
exactly.
Yeah. I think this is, we had some really powerful women today.
I think so too. I enjoyed it.
And like a broad spectrum. We got like a warrior woman, and we got a really beautiful writer.
I like it. I like it when we do that.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Thank you for joining, everybody. We were going to do a shout out to our editor and producer, Lucas McIntyre,
Thank
who
you,
is
Lucas.
also the leader of a band called the Tourist Union. So you should check those guys out. Mm-hmm. They just recently opened for the Straw Hat Revival, which is a really cool band as well. And our theme music is graciously provided to us by Jennifer Finch and the band L7. You should check out their stuff. Follow them on Instagram.
And follow us too if you're not already.
We're at IDK Her Podcast. Don't forget, if you have a story about a woman in your life who did something really fucking cool and badass, send it our way.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.